Hey, and welcome back to the Pit Lane, a Formula One podcast where we talk about everything Formula One. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing the season finale in Abu Dhabi. I am your host, Jordan Wynn, and alongside is my co-host, Alden Kaywell. Welcome back, Alden.
Hey, Jordan, it's good to see you again. What a season, huh? Last race, finally getting around to the podcast. Good to be back.
Took a week off, kind of, but here we are, finally getting back to it. Don't have a whole lot of news before we get to the race right now.
No, it was a short week in between Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi. So,
Especially with the time zone change.
exactly. They kind of just hit the ground running, started going, didn't they?
Yeah. A lot actually happened. I think FP1 had a lot of young drivers in it initially.
10 of the 20 drivers in that session were newbies, if you will.
Yeah, they had to allocate the last of their two practice sessions for a young driver that's not currently in Formula One.
Yep.
So that was, I don't know. I don't want to say interesting is the right word, but I think Dragovic had a good test, but that's normal. I think he was second place at the end of that. Not that a whole lot of this matters.
Right.
But he was right on the pace, but he's also been a reserve driver for, I think, 2 or 3 years for Aston.
Yeah, he's probably got the most experience of the quote-unquote rookie drivers in the car. He was doing it earlier this year. He's like their testing or reserve driver as well, maybe a simulator driver. He's also done some of the same stuff last year. So he's been around, but it was good to see him. And there was nothing really informative about this session. Not all the teams were running all their drivers. It was middle of the day. It was not indicative of the qualifying or what it was going to be like during the race. So
There wasn't a whole lot to gain from this session, especially.
Right.
We can get an FP2 though. Carlos Sainz crashed.
Yeah, pretty fast. It was a high speed crash out of turn 2 or 3. Kind of lost the balance and control of the vehicle over some bumps.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only one that spun, but he's the only one that actually hit the wall through that. I can't remember who the other driver was that hit the wall, but yeah, they ended up grinding out the surface. On turn 3 because of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, after the session, I remember hearing about it during the FP3 session. They talked about how during the middle of the night, some of the crews were out there grinding down some of these bumps between turns 2 and 3. It's a really high-speed corner, so you hit out, you ground out, and you can lose tons of balance and downforce, and car spins because you're going, your pedals, your foot's on the pedal.
In these cars, especially because of that ground effect, you lose all that downforce per se, or the suction right to the ground as you lift off from the bumps.
100%.
But so that was kind of the major news from FP2. The ground at the track, going overnight to FP3.
Hulk also crashed out of either turn 1 or 2 during that session. So there was not a lot of actual running time for the teams now that their normal drivers had got back into their vehicles. So between FP1 and FP2, there were certain drivers who had a total of 15 minutes of driving time.
Yeah.
Not a good amount of time to sort of get your plan and your data and the feel of the track. I mean, they've all been around this circuit a number of times, but definitely some of them entered Saturday with playing catch up.
And the big news Saturday, I think Carlos didn't make Q2 even. Yeah. He was out in Q1.
Yeah.
That really hurt Ferrari's chances at trying to get second place in the championship.
Yeah, just a rough 48 hours Friday, Saturday session for Carlos Sainz. I mean, I guess even if you bring it back to Las Vegas, you just some raw luck, rebuilding the car twice when it didn't need to be.
Yeah, with the drain hole cover.
Yeah.
Just really bad, unfortunate circumstances
Bad
that
luck.
aren't really his fault entirely.
No.
But yeah, we can get more into him later in the weekend. But yeah, we can get to the race. Red Bull, Max Verstappen was on pole. Didn't really have a whole lot of challengers.
No, it was the opening 2 laps. Charles, who was second in qualifying, was following pretty well. Made some attempts to pass him on the first lap with the
big braking zones after the 2 long straights.
Yeah, And he was really close going into, what was that, turn 8 and 9, or 7, 8, and 9, but just couldn't sort of bring the overtake home.
Nor do I think he really wanted to risk it either.
Right, because his race wasn't with Max. It was with the Mercedes, which were further down the field. All Charles really needed to do was get second, keep second. If Max crashes or whatever, for whatever reason, he can get first, cool. But basically, don't fall back from second place.
Right.
At all costs.
Yes.
So he didn't need to run up the back of Max and take both himself and Max out. Championship's over for the drivers. And Charles.
Right.
His position is solidified. All he needed to do was bring home the 18, potentially 19 points for his position in second place for Ferrari for the constructors.
Right. And so, speaking on that, we can kind of skip over Max here for now because he wins the race going away.
Right.
No challenge.
Red Bull's won. Max has won.
That's
done and dusted.
We can move on.
Yeah.
Charles, on the other hand, has quite a race with kind of toward the end, I guess, playing a little bit of games here with Checo.
And Russell.
Yep. So Checo's coming through the field, and he has a race with Lando Norris and ends up with a 5-second penalty because he goes deep into a corner, kind of just slams into him. But it was pretty hard contact considering how much room he was given.
Agreed. There wasn't a lot of damage to either car. I think physically, if you watched it, you might go, oh, that's a bit of a love tap. But he did hit him pretty hard.
Yeah.
They were both lucky to not have any amount of substantial damage. It was hard to like wheel rim to wheel rim.
Right. It was the best type of contact you could get as drivers where you don't damage each other's vehicles,
Right.
hopefully.
Or their race, yeah.
Right. And so Checo ends up with a 5-second penalty, and I think that was for 4th position at that time. And Checo's catching...
Right, storming through the field.
Yeah. He's catching up to Russell. He's catching up to Leclerc. This 5-second penalty. The scenario which ends up happening is if Checo can beat Russell and Leclerc stays ahead of Checo, Ferrari gets second.
Correct.
In the championship.
Yeah.
But because of this 5-second penalty, it makes it...
Checo needs to clear Russell by 5 seconds.
Correct.
So it's Charles second, Russell third, Charles second, Russell third, Checo fourth.
Right.
And Checo passes Russell.
Yep, no problem.
No problem. But then Ferrari tells Charles, hey, give Checo the DRS.
Charles was on the radio talking about it.
Right. They were talking to each other. They're like, hey, we got, we can try and do something here.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, give Checo the DRS and we'll let him catch up. And then you can almost let him through.
Right.
And Charles comes on the radio and says that. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna let him catch up and then let him go so that he can clear Russell minus the 5 seconds, still be ahead of Russell, and then Charles can climb back up ahead of Checo, because if he can sort of design a scenario on the race circuit
where he's in between that 5 seconds, but Russell is not.
Yes. Like you said, Ferrari goes second, Mercedes comes third.
Right.
For the constructors, which is a lot of money.
10 million, I think.
No matter which way you cut it, that is a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah. And because because Leclerc needs to be in between that 5 seconds, it makes it difficult for him to judge, okay, where do I need to be on track and keep Russell behind me? Because I think Russell was in about 2 or 3 seconds at that point, at the time that Leclerc let Checo go.
Because Leclerc had sort of lifted and coasted a bunch to bring Checo into the fold.
Right.
But that also meant that he was bringing Russell into the fold. So, those three were getting very compact during the last, and this was all happening in 2 or 3 laps to the checkered flag. Right. So people are thinking quickly, there's actually some meaningful racing going on at the very end of the very last race. And it was a lot of fun because the live standings were changing almost every corner, because Lewis is kind of further down. At this point, Sainz is not in the points.
Well, he was, but he needed to make another pit stop.
Correct.
But we can get to that.
Yeah. He basically, the Ferrari strategy compromised Sainz's ending position. He was a non-factor
in the end.
Ultimately. Lewis is like battling for a point or two in like 10th or 9th or something with Yuki, or I don't know, it was Lance Stroll or someone.
It was
Yuki. And yeah, I mean, that also could have been a make or break thing. Literally every point counted for both of these teams and all 4 drivers.
Yep. And so it was interesting, like you were saying, but Charles decides to not back into Russell, to slow Russell down to be out of 5 seconds of Checo, because it would have made him, the line would have been so fine for Leclerc to be not within 5 seconds and Russell to be out of that 5 seconds.
Yeah, or Russell could have just, if
Just
Charles
gone by
wasn't,
him.
exactly, he could have just passed him on one of the straights or something. If Charles had a bad exit or, lifted and coasted too much, that would have been gambling a little bit too much for both Ferrari and Charles. I think they played it as best as they could.
And it was sportsman-like.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Enough.
Yeah. I don't think anyone...
It's not a Hamilton, Rosberg 16 situation.
No, not even close.
But ultimately, Leclerc ends up second place in the race, P2.
After Checo's penalty.
After Checo's penalty.
Yeah.
And Russell ends up P3.
Correct.
Because he was also within the 5 seconds.
Yeah, by like 0.8 or 1.2 seconds.
Yeah.
It was close.
It was close, but it was enough where
Yep.
no one was really worried about
So,
it.
like you said, Max wins. Charles is a second.
Yep.
Russell third. Checo ends up 4th after the 5-second penalty. So, Red Bull come away with a bunch of points. Like we talked about, Sainz, he ultimately did not finish the race.
Yeah, it was, I guess it's not really weird. So essentially, they were waiting on a safety car. They used
Gambling.
The gambling. I think they used 2 hard tires.
Yeah,
Is that right?
hard.
Yeah, two sets of hards in the race, and you need to use 2 tire compounds, different tire compounds
Of the 3.
that are available. And since he only used 1, he needed to make 1 more pit stop. And we're waiting. Never happened. And so Carlos pit on the last lap. Or sorry, I guess his last lap, because Max was coming,
Which was
closer to
ultimately
him.
the time that Max just like finished the
race.
And they're like, yeah, we're not sending you back out there.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah. Sainz never went back out on the racetrack.
Go ahead, just get out. We'll pack it up.
So yeah, Sainz's race ultimately kind of a wash.
Yeah.
So tough last couple races for him, as you mentioned. Not a great way to finish the season, but he's ready to move on.
No, I mean, he did end up getting a lot of points in Las Vegas, but I'd say if you combine those 2 weekends into one weekend or one sort of pseudo event, which they're not, but
it feels that way when
for
you have
him,
back-to-backs
it's like, oh God,
yeah,
double bad races. Well, what sort of bad luck is this? Yeah, he needs to go on a really long vacation at some beach resort, and just wash away all this bad luck.
But he got a race win though, at least this year. So he's one of 3 drivers that can say he won a race this year, and the only non-Red Bull driver.
Yeah, I think if you, at the beginning of the season, if you told Sainz you will win a race, you will beat Max and both Red Bulls on merit in at least one event, and you'll finish, you will be battling for second place in the Constructors Tournament at the beginning of the season, I think he'd take that. I think both Ferrari drivers would.
Yep. Especially, Yep. So good year in the end on him, but the finish was not great.
Right.
We can get to Mercedes here, as we talked about Russell, P3 in the end. After kind of the chaos at the end of Checo going by, there were a few radio messages he had talking with his engineers about Hamilton.
Oh, Russell?
Asking how he was doing, and they kind of gave him really vague answers, like, oh, he's doing the best he can. And he's just like, what does that mean? Like, are we okay for P2 in the championship? Or are we not? And he just kind of, it felt like, based on the messages we heard, that he didn't know what was going on. And he was just kind of in no man's land running his race.
If you're a driver, I'm guessing, because I've never driven in a competitive scenario like that, you would want to know. You'd want to know, like, hey, is what we're doing here getting us anywhere?
Right. Do I need to do more?
Yes, exactly. Ultimately, that's what he's getting at. Tell me what's going on so I know if I need to do more. The team is like, look, we know what's going on. We would tell you. And we don't need to give you any information that isn't important to your race.
Right.
Which is why they gave him like super vague answers, right? Like,
I understand it.
right. Like, Russell, just focus on what's ahead of you. Hamilton's doing literally, like, he's a 7-time world champion. Don't worry about Hamilton.
He'll do fine.
He'll do fine. What you need to do is get your head down, put the pedal to the metal, and pass everyone in front of you.
Right.
That's what your responsibility is right now.
Right.
And ultimately, they should probably like tell him to shut up. But also, it's like the last race of the year. Tensions are high. You're like, oh man, I'm not going to see this guy for like 90 days. Like, let's go.
Right.
Don't ask me stupid questions. Just drive.
Let's finish the year. Yeah. But he wants to finish the year on a high. You want to make sure he does as much as he can for the team, which, I mean, ultimately, they ended up P2, so everything was fine.
Right.
But it was just kind of funny that
it was, because he was just like, what does that mean?
How come nobody's telling me anything? I need to know. I want to know. I want to help.
It would have been funny if Toto had come on and just like, George, it doesn't matter. Just finish the race.
The car. Goodness. We can get to Hamilton's race here too. So he was battling with Yuki at the end after, I think he had a collision on the first lap too. Is that right?
Like in the opening corner, or like down at turn at the hairpin.
I think it was at the hairpin.
Okay, I don't quite remember. Yeah, maybe he did run into someone. Was it Piastri or someone?
I can't remember.
Can't remember.
It was too long ago already. but yeah, he started P11. He kind of was there all day long until toward the end. He was catching Yuki.
Oh yeah, didn't he have some damage on his wing?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, you're right.
Like he didn't lose his plate.
The end plate was all wonky, but it wasn't dangerously falling off. It just kind of like not the way it was supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. I was like, I couldn't remember, and but yeah, he had some damage, and then battling at the end with Yuki for I think P8 he was going for.
Yeah,
and he got past him, and then Yuki got him back.
Yeah, it was like down the second straight. Hamilton passes him going into turn 9. Can't quite get on the brakes the way he needs to. Spins out ever so slightly. Just loses control of the rears. It just gets a little cattywampus, and Yuki just goes whoop right around him.
Yep.
And carries on, and that's like basically that last turn, that big round one, kind of is like the end of sector 2, the beginning of sector 3, and
it's the last passing opportunity, essentially.
Yuki just closes the door and ends up finishing P8. It would have been some good points for Hamilton to help sort of
solidify and not have to worry
about what was happening up front with Russell. But he ends up finishing P9. He can get some points.
McLaren, P5 for Lando.
Yeah, didn't really have a big of a race. A bunch of people passed him, but he was fast all weekend. Piastri was P6. He started a little bit higher up, but
he had a tough first stint. I think I don't know if he just used up his tires right away too early, and he just ran out of gas with them or what. But even Yuki was going by him before the pit stops. But yeah, tough day for Piastri, but ultimately P6. So.
Right, with
Not
that
so
P5
bad.
and P6, they end up finishing fourth McLaren in the Constructors' Championship.
Yep, they solidify fourth position over Aston Martin. Alonso P7, he had kind of a similar day. Well, do you remember where he qualified? He was like P9 or P8.
He definitely got into Q3.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly where it might have been P9 starting.
Yeah. But he got by Yuki earlier on, and that was really the only real position he gained, I think. Ultimately, ends up P7. Lance Stroll, P10, another decent weekend for him, I mean, considering. So he finishes off the year fairly well, I would say. Aston Martin finishes P5 in the Constructors.
Which they probably would have taken at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But not after the first half of the races.
Yeah.
So a little disappointing in the end.
Started well, deflated, but
here we are. P5, still a good year for them. AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda, as we talked about, was P8. He tried a one-stopper.
not even tried. He completed a one-stopper.
You're right. He completed it. And basically, AlphaTauri had to risk it because they needed to do something different being ahead of the quicker cars. And they needed a P6 to get 7th place in the constructors. Ahead of Williams,
that's right.
Assuming Williams doesn't score, which they didn't. Yuki had a good first stint. He led the race. I think he's the second Japanese driver to lead an F1 race.
Correct.
Takuma Sato
Correct.
is the other. So, fun stat for you.
A good stat.
Good stat. We like those. So, good for Yuki. They had a one stop. Ultimately, didn't pay off as didn't get any safety cars. And, his tires faded at the end, obviously, compared to everybody else that's on a two-stopper.
It just had done so many laps.
Yep. So, yeah, P8 in the end. But good weekend for him. Good finish for him as well. Daniel Ricciardo, P11. Okay weekend.
Okay weekend, yeah. He ended up starting P15 or something like that. His race was compromised a little bit at the beginning, or sort of like that end of the first stint, beginning of the second stint. He had a visor tear off stuck in a brake duct or something.
Yep.
At least that's sort of the chatter that we heard on the radio. Kind of rendered him a little bit useless for a couple laps, and it impacted his race ever so slightly. Ended up finishing P11 outside the points. But I'd say, Daniel looks just as good as Yuki, depending on their weekend in that AlphaTauri. So seems like they've got two equalish drivers over there.
Waiting in the wins for
waiting
next
for
year's shenanigans, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little later. But, so Daniel Ricciardo, P11, no points for him. And AlphaTauri finishes 8th in the Constructors. Get to Alpine, another quiet, kind of nonchalant weekend with them, it feels like. I feel like they're just kind of forgotten half the time, in my opinion. You kind of, unless they have a really good weekend, you're kind of just,
Right,
you
they're
don't
just
hear
like,
much.
just outside of the points, but they're not battling for the points, but they're not like dead last. They're just kind of there. They don't get a lot of screen time. No.
Ocon, P12, Gasly, P13. We had some chatter on the radio with Gasly being mad that Ocon got to pit first, even though Gasly was ahead.
Yeah.
And Ocon got the favorable strategy in terms of, when you pit.
Yeah. There's definitely trouble in paradise over there at Alpine.
Two French drivers, French team. It's always going to happen. They never liked each other to begin with. They had their own,
they've been
their
beefing
karting
for a
days
long
and
time.
stuff,
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, they've been beefing for a long time.
Yeah. So it's not the first time, won't be the last.
No, but also even like little things where like if you're normally you may have just been like, oh, okay, like he got a favorable thing this weekend when that shouldn't have happened. And maybe you can like brush some of those things off, but like with them, every single detail matters.
Yes.
And they'll argue about it. They'll bring it up. They'll make a big deal out of it. It's just what it's like over there at Alpine. I don't know. No one seems to control the drivers.
Or the team, for a matter of fact. As a whole, it feels like.
Yeah. Leaderless is how I would describe it.
Well, they also switched, leadership.
Yeah, they got rid of
the middle
Altmaier.
year. Yeah. After what?
They
Belgium?
cleaned house over in, what was that, Belgium or during the summer break?
Yeah, it was Belgium. They told them before the race weekend. They announced it before the weekend was over. Before the summer break.
And still let him continue his job.
Yeah. Which, who knows?
That's awkward.
That's what we mean by leadership slacking. And
You're right.
yeah.
All the way up.
But they end up 6th in the Constructors. So,
It's...
Again, that's how I feel about their team as a whole. I don't know.
Yeah. Bad livery. We love livery chat over here.
Yes, we do.
Bad color scheme. Mediocre car.
You don't like the pink?
No.
It doesn't look that bad. I don't like the bright pink as a whole on it. Like when they do the BWT livery, like for the first 2 or 4 races.
Yeah.
That's too much.
That's too much for
The
me.
pink accent's okay. I don't think they're.
I think that car would look better with red accents.
I don't disagree.
A
But there's
French
already
team should have French colors,
That's fair.
not
That's a fair point.
Baskin Robbins
Especially
colors.
since Alpine aren't they red, white?
Yeah, they're blue, white, and red.
Sorry, blue, white, and red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's French. They're owned by Renault. Like,
I don't know.
anyway,
Yeah.
these are dream scenarios.
We can move on. Sure, we'll have off-season livery chat. Anyways,
Williams, like you said, they were battling with AlphaTauri for 7th and 8th in the Constructors Championship.
Tournament.
Williams, they've got a fast car in a straight line. Turns out you need to also go fast in the corners in Abu Dhabi.
the truth.
Turns out. Albon finished P14 and Sargent finished P16. If they had scored some points, it would have done them some good to finish and lock up 7th. As it turns out, they didn't need to. I'm sure they would have liked to, but because, as we mentioned, Yuki's and Daniel's finishing positions, Williams clinches 7th, which is a big improvement for them.
They were last year.
Yep.
They were last.
So they're making headway.
Huge.
That's huge.
Yeah. Like you said, huge for them. Haas, another weekend to forget. I don't know how many more weekends.
That'd be 23 weekends to forget for them.
I don't know how much longer this can go on for Gene Haas. Oh, wait, it'll go on forever because he's making money.
Yeah. Turns out if you own a Formula One team, it makes you money now.
Yeah, crazy.
Also, Chipotle sponsorship, bringing in the dough.
Can't wait for that livery next year.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Tinfoil livery.
Just like wrinkled, like tinfoil.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
Hulk P15 and Magnussen P20 in the end. That can't be right, can he? Or did he retire?
No, they finished.
He must.
It's 20th.
Oh, even with Sainz DNF, he was behind him.
I think maybe it's because Sainz is actually went all the way up to the last lap.
And then he probably crossed the line.
Yeah. He might have finished P19.
And Magnussen would have finished the race, and that would have technically been behind Carlos.
Yeah.
It's a strange one. So, yeah, Magnussen P20.
Haas finished last.
Yeah.
In the Constructors Championship.
Yeah, and I think they were, 9th or 8th last year. So
it's going backwards.
Yeah, they had a rough year. Car's not great. It's good in qualifying for Hulk, at least.
Great on one lap.
But anything that has to do with a race is not good.
No.
Alfa Romeo, Zhou Guanyu P17, and Bottas P19. Not great days for them either.
Nope.
9th in the Constructors. They could have, I don't know. I guess any of them could have, the bottom 4 could have passed anybody with a decent race. But AlphaTauri was the only one that had a decent race.
Yeah.
Or good race, let's say. And there were no real major DNFs to really help anybody get extra points this weekend. So there's really no movement in the bottom in the end. The Constructor, well, there's no movement at all in the end, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, not the Constructors, not a great weekend for them.
No. Which is sad. I know at the beginning of last year they had a strong car at the beginning of the season.
Was that Bottas's first year?
Yeah.
There too?
Last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they sort of faded as the season went on. They don't seem to be able to develop the car throughout the season. And I think that also repeated itself this year. They didn't have as good of a start in the early part of the season as they did last year. But midway through the season, they definitely just sort of stop all development and just focus on next year.
Yep.
And, it's got to feel bad for the drivers. You're just literally trying your best, and you got a 4-month-old car that's got no new bits. Meanwhile, McLaren goes from like dead last in the championship.
Yeah, they were 10th.
They were dead last. Yeah. It's got to be a mentally difficult place to find yourself.
Yeah.
Both in the team and as a driver.
And you give as much feedback as you can, blah, 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 but nothing, nothing's coming.
Right.
Nothing's changing up until next year. So how, like you're saying, mentally it's got to be very difficult.
Right.
Man, I think it'd be worse for Haas because they even got the upgrades and they didn't do anything. And that was a major, but it kind of sounded like that it was just body work more than anything else. Like chassis was the same and everything. Like
for the Haas?
Yeah. It was just body work. Like it had nothing to do with the actual like integrity of the vehicle. At least that's what I was reading.
Interesting.
Hearing about. So maybe next year will be better.
Hopefully everyone shows up with just a super fast car next year.
Super fast Red Bull, and they all look the same. Everybody
except for Red Bull. They're the only ones who can be slower next year.
Fingers crossed. Drivers of the day. Who do you got?
Yeah, best, worst drivers / team of the day. My highlights. Winner of the weekend, it's got to be Red Bull. Stellar season, which was capped off by an excellent race. They had a good weekend, both Checo and Max. Checo ends up finishing P4 with the penalty. He would have finished maybe P3 without the penalty, because I don't think Charles would have let him catch up. But they finish 1 and 2 in the driver's standings, and they finish number 1 as a team. I mean, that's just a solid lockout. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of prize money. I'm sure there's bonuses in their contracts for all that. Everyone's happy over there. They had a good weekend. Loser for the weekend, I'm going to say Alfa Romeo as a whole. Nothing burger weekend. I think we kind of expect them to be a little bit better than this. The Haas has looked bad all season. The Alfa hasn't quite looked as bad all season, but like finishing 17th and 19th for Zhou and Bottas respectively, finishing 9th in the Constructors' Championship. And we kind of talked about it just a little bit ago. It's just
where they're
at. They gotta get focused on the off season and come back real strong next year. So hopefully they can.
I have Yuki as driver of the day or winner of the weekend. I think he had a very good weekend. With the one stop he had to complete, and he still finished the points. And he was P8, got 4 points, didn't quite get to Williams.
And he didn't crack under pressure behind Hamilton.
Right. Didn't crack under pressure. And I know a lot of the focus next year within that team is Ricciardo trying to get that seat from Checo. And I know Yuki wants it too. Whether or not that's even in the minds of Red Bull, I don't know. And it kind of doesn't seem like it with all the chatter. But he's giving himself a shot with these types of performances, in my opinion. I still think his chances are very slim. They don't want to have a second driver that's young up against Max again. They've seen how that's worked with Gasly. Albon. Didn't work out well. Ricciardo was there with him already, and they're buddies. And they think he can handle it. He's more mature and should be able to handle it, whereas maybe they don't think that way with Yuki. But hey, it keeps Yuki in the conversation. But yeah, see what happens next year with that. Loser for the weekend, Sainz. Couldn't help his team this weekend. Had that crash. And practice, just tough way to finish the season. Missed out on a weekend where Ferrari could have finished P2 in the Constructors with a decent finish from Carlos. I think they needed, 3 points from him. Couldn't get it. So, yeah, that's my loser, Carlos.
I give one more winner. The McLaren livery for the final weekend.
Liked it that much?
Oh, I don't know if I liked it that much, but it was interesting, compelling, and wasn't just boring orange and blue. They introduced some flavor. They seem to do this as a one-off for the end of the season. They did it last year or maybe 2 years ago as well. It just, it looked good.
Yeah, it was clean. Good. It was a clean look. Sharp and under the lights, too, which helps. Daytime, but the lights.
Agreed.
Good. Yep. I think AlphaTauri brought back their squiggly lined.
They kept the Las Vegas livery.
Probably because they shipped the same container.
And so did Alfa Romeo. They kept their.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice.
Vegas. Well, because they were 17th and 19th.
It's true. So that's the last race of the season,
right? But since then, up to now,
well, we did know for a long time that Alfa Romeo, is no longer the title sponsor for Sauber,
the Sauber run team,
and they didn't do anything other than they paid money for it, right? But
Alfa Romeo and Ferrari have a partnership from a car manufacturing standpoint.
Sure.
Or they're owned by the same holding company or something like that. They're part of the same brands. So that helped solidify the Sauber Ferrari relationship for engine supplies
Yep. Until
2026. Audi comes in. So Audi now, I think at the end of this season, will purchase 25% of Sauber, which would be awkward to then have a different company in Alfa Romeo sponsor the team you own.
Auto company.
Right. A whole different auto company.
Right.
From a different country.
Yep. Do you think we'll see some rings on that car next year?
I don't know if we'll see some rings, but I think they'll start to introduce a color palette that will sort of have the look and feel of the Audi racing. Maybe they end up sponsoring it as well. I don't know if you would want to sponsor a car that you know is not going to be your product.
True.
Right? If you own 25%, but you're not investing in sort of the
infrastructure
of it
yet.
Right, do you want to put your name on it? Because if they finish 9th again, I don't know if you want to put your name on it, but I suppose how it couldn't be all bad.
Well, you know the Germans don't want to be behind the French team. So shots fired. Sorry about that. AlphaTauri's changing teams, or sorry, not changing teams, changing names next year. It's unconfirmed what the name will be. Rumor is that kind of came out was Racing Bulls, but I hope that's not what it is my opinion. What do you think?
That sounds like a awful name. If that's true, we want Toro Rosso or bust, or we riot. That's what we want. Toro Rosso.
Bring it back.
Bring it back. Don't be cowards. Put a Red Bull on the car.
Please.
And thank you.
We haven't seen it yet.
No. Listen to us tell them what they're supposed to do.
We know stuff.
But yeah, turns out the clothing, the AlphaTauri was the clothing brand of the Red Bull umbrella. Didn't really work out, so they're changing, which is...
Are they getting rid of their clothing brand?
I think so.
Really?
I think so.
Huh.
I mean, they're still going to sell Red Bull merch.
Right.
But that whole...
Their stuff was expensive.
Was expensive.
Like, if you looked at their, like, online
I was there.
website.
Oh, it's like $300 for a jacket.
Yeah.
$400.
It's like $150 for a T-shirt.
They must have thought they were French.
Like that Macklemore song. You know.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was like Balenciaga pricing for, not to besmirch anyone, but not as good of product.
Right. Right. Other big news, Logan Sargent he was the last driver that hadn't had his seat confirmed for next year.
Correct.
Up until what? Friday?
Friday. Thursday or Friday? I think it was Friday.
Yeah. But his seat is now confirmed for 2024.
Let's
Our favorite
go.
American.
Let's go.
Back on the grid for next year.
24 races with an American. Fingers crossed.
now.
Fingers crossed.
Right. So he's back on the grid next year. And this is going to be, we believe, the first time in the history.
Right. Barring any crazy surprises
it hasn't
this
happened
offseason.
yet. It hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
It'll be the first time in Formula One history that every driver that's on their current team will start the grid next year with their current team.
Right. Every driver that started the last race of this 2023 season will start the first race of the 2024 season in the same vehicle.
Yes.
That would be crazy. Again, barring any crazy surprises.
We've had COVID stuff and like sicknesses and,
right.
Stroll like smashed his wrist, but
right.
he came back still.
And Alonso had that crash as well.
Bike accidents. Yeah.
Yep.
That's both of them did. Different years.
Yeah, I think.
But it was both cycling accidents.
Yeah. These guys got to get off their bikes.
Apparently. Or find a bike path or something, not on the road. Yeah, so Logan's renewed for 2024.
That's great. We'd love to see it. And Williams, they finished 7th. They've got money. It feels like they've got motivation, both internal and external. They're on the right path. The steam engines are rolling over there.
It'd be good to see Williams back.
Yeah.
Battling up front again. It's been a while.
That'd be awesome.
It would. It was the last podium. Oh, I guess Russell technically in Belgium?
Yeah, we're not going to count that.
No, but
it's got to be
Lance
what? Stroll in Baku.
Yeah, I think it was Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy because that was his rookie year too, or second year?
Second year, maybe. Yeah, that was like Baku 2018.
Sounds right.
Wow.
Yeah. Feels like a long time for Williams, but yeah, they're getting back on the right track. So good to see.
And so looking forward, we got some plans for the off season. Stay in touch.
We'll have a season recap. And maybe going forward for our 2024.
I think we're going to do some circuit chat.
Oh, yes. Livery chat, of
livery
course.
Chat.
When those start coming
we're gonna
out.
Yeah, exactly.
We might have to have a dream livery episode first and then have an episode with after all the liveries come out.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. But we'll be back for 2024.
Yeah. It's been a good end of the season for 2023 to get us going here, and we look forward to a full season of Formula One next year. We'll also conclude another episode of the Pit Lane. It's been your host, Jordan Wynn and Alden Cable. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you next time.
See ya.